You had many achievements, I'm sure, as a child. What are some of the achievements that you remember the most?
One of the things that I think about the most is that when I was in elementary school, our teachers, I think I was in 5th grade, went on strike because of working conditions and pay. And so I remember the strike went on so long that my sister was a senior in high school that she ended up going to Delaware to go to high school because my mom didn't want her to, she wanted to make sure she finished her senior year so she could go to college. So
who was in Delaware that she went to visit?
My uncle.
Oh, okay.
My mother's brother lived in Delaware. So my sister was off in Delaware. So she's usually the one who was the babysitter for me. So my mom was off at work and I was riding my bike. Our town was only a mile long, or a mile and a half. So you could only, ride like so much. So I rode up the hill to the school, to the middle school, and I saw the teachers protesting and marching, and I'm like, can I join in? And they said, absolutely. So here I had my banana seat bike with my handlebars that went like this, and they put a sign and they taped it around, so the sign that I was protesting. So I'm riding, they're marching in circles and I'm riding in circles. And lo and behold, there was a photographer who took a picture of me on my bike standing there, and the teachers were behind me. And it was published in our weekly publication. It was called The Record. And my mom almost fainted. Like, I cannot believe you were up there protesting with the teachers. Like, she was proud, but of course she was embarrassed because they're probably thinking, where's your parents? And of course they were both working. But I was really proud because, again, teachers had played such a great role in my life. I think my life was thinking about, again, being the teachers because of so much, throughout my life, even in high school, how much they helped direct me.
So teachers really pushed you along. They found you to be very intelligent and worthy, and so they try to push you into, good classes that would benefit you.
Yes, and stretch me, because again, this is an environment that there wasn't these stereotypes where, all the black kids were tracked to a lower track, and all the white kids got the college track. No, it was really about the kids who were really interested in learning, irrespective of race. So again, a community that, I hope still exists.
When you got into college and you met other black kids, were you able to figure it out in time?
No, I had difficulties integrating into a black group because I didn't have a traditional black urban experience. I mean, if I were white, it would have been more obvious.
Yeah.
But because I was black, it was less obvious that I didn't have the same experience. So it was always really hard.
So who were your friends in college, and mostly white kids?
Mostly white kids. I remember when I went to college, I was roomed with one white kid because the school was predominantly white, and then I went to San Jose State University in California, and I was paired with a young black woman from Oakland, California. And if you can imagine what her experience, single parent, just completely different. Oakland, California back then, was very different from what it is.
Town.
Yeah, from what it is today. And so I said, I can't deal with this. Like, it was just so different. She would play loud music, and I just was like, I can't listen to the loud, her music was even different. And I say within, I grew up on soul music and it was calm and you could sing to it, and you could dance to it. And all of a sudden there was like this bumping, loud thumping music, and I was just like, okay, I got to get out of here. So I ended up moving into an apartment actually with 2 other white women who, one ended up being, an accountant. You know what I mean? Just different people who were more, they were white, but our experience were probably more in line with one another.
Do you still have those problems today? I mean, it isn't really a problem. It's a cultural difference.
It's a cultural difference.
So do you still feel that when you meet people today, like black women, that you might have this cultural difference with them?
Well, once I got to law school, it was completely different. And in the work environment, was a little bit different. I mean, depending on where I was working and what was going on. But, still to this day, I think about my community is definitely a lot of, I'm married to a guy who is Dutch, who's a white Dutch person. And so a lot of my friend in my community is white, even though I do have black friends in a black community. And
your black friends, did they had experiences pretty much like you had?
Now, my black friends I have now, no, different. I mean, because now we're adults, and I think it's, you know what I mean, you're adults, and so your life is very different, and your focuses are very different than when you're adolescents, teenager, college. Because, you think about how it's important to fit in, identify with groups, and those are more important when you're younger. One of the things I think I had struggled with was that there was, because of the where I grew up socioeconomically, I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood where there were rich white people, rich black people, but there were poor white people, poor black people, middle class white people, middle class black people. But I had a hard time identifying, or can have a hard time identifying, with rich black people. And they say, there's this whole thing about being bougie, and I just feel like I don't have to be that way, because, I have this richness of people from all socioeconomic backgrounds that I can draw on, and I tend to have the most problem with people who are very showy. Very showy with their money, who are very pretentious and who are very judgmental. So,
I think everybody has problems with those people. Do you have any more to say about your undergraduate year? Where did you go? You went to San Jose State. Did you go someplace before then?
I went to San Jose State University for my undergraduate degree. I had quite a hard time in San Jose, California. That's where I ended up at.
Yeah, okay.
But I started off at Slippery Rock University, which is south of Erie, Pennsylvania. It's a rural area. So you take somebody who grew up in a small town, about less than 9,000 people, and then you drop them into a town of 8,000 students, surrounded by cornfields and farmers, and I just was like, this is not me at all. I have to get out of there. So luckily I was able to transfer to a community college in California, and I live with my mother's sister, who's my aunt, and her husband. Their kids were older and they were out of the house, so they had room for one more raise. They said they're going to raise one more kid, so I said okay. So I lived with them for 2 years. I went to a community college, graduated from a community college that was a feeder to San Jose State University. So then I moved to San Jose, and that's where I had my first roommate. And I had a great time. I actually met an amazing, the political science department there in the 90s. Excellent people. My mentor has since, passed away. But I also met a judge. Her name was Ladoris Cordell, who was very an activist, turned judge. And then, after she was a judge, she went on to do some other things. but I had tremendous support from San Jose State University that when I graduated, I ended up getting a job at the city of San Jose in the mayor's office. And that was, again, another, I'll say, transformative experience, because I was hired to work for Mayor Tom McHenry in his last years of his term. And so he was a visionary, and I say a visionary because part of what he established was a redevelopment authority, and took a town that was known to be dangerous and horrible to turning it into a cultural place, a place to visit and have his story. And then he actually built arenas and light rails. I mean, so these are things that he had a vision for. He said this town has a vision, which now of course is part of Silicon Valley, which nobody really thinks is a real place anymore. But at some point there was a real heart to it, and there was so many tremendous people.
So what did you do in the mayor's office?
So I was a budget analyst, which I wasn't crunching numbers, but I was looking at programs, so community-based organizations. So even though I had this title called budget analyst, I was really a community-based organization analyst. So I had a lot of opportunity to start meeting the community of San Jose, and it was amazing.
So you loved your job.
I love my job. Mayor, of course, was at the end of his term, and then the next mayor was Susan Hammer, who was, coming on as a new mayor and wanted to bring in her own staff. So I was part of the transition. But at that point, when you work with, Mayor Tom McHenry had an amazing staff because he'd attracted people from all over the country, the best. You say, oh my gosh, I've got to do something with my life. I can't, what do you do next after that? Because it was such a highlight. And that's when I talked about going to law school. And it was actually like the chief of staff, and some of my coworkers who encouraged me, yes, go to law school. Do something that you want to do to continue to help the community. So I applied to law schools, and one of the law schools I applied to was the University of Pittsburgh. This vision that, Pittsburgh could be, this place that had so much potential, because it had the qualities that Silicon Valley had. Like, it had passion, it had community, it had just had people who really cared. And so I got accepted, and I left California, and I went to law school at the University of Pittsburgh.
Were you sad to leave California, particularly because of the weather?
I did think about the weather when I was leaving, because you don't appreciate the weather when you're there, and then you leave and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is, what do you mean there's winter, there's snow, you got to get boots, it's like, what? Where's my leather jacket? Like, that's, my gloves, that's usually my winter outfit. So I wasn't sad about that, but I was sad that, I'd left friends and community and a life I'd started to build there, and then I had to rebuild. And it was a cultural shock for me. I wasn't prepared at all for being in Pittsburgh and being in a law school, because all of a sudden I was surrounded, I was just surrounded by people who were completely different. And law school is very different your first year, because there's a lot of competition and there's a lot of ranking. Yeah, there's a lot of ranking and competition, and I just wasn't ready for that. Because I come from a place where there was always collaboration, and we're going to do this together, and you can't do it alone. And so I had a hard time, finding my people, and my first year was really tough. And
so
then
you were kind of isolated the first year.
First year I was isolated, and so of course, I'm a person of color, so of course all the black kids in law school, you look, there's like 8 or 9 of us.
Yeah, there still weren't a whole load of women in law school either, were there?
There was at my law school.
There were
in my law school quite a bit of women. So I found my community.
And were they people of color mostly?
No, there were a diverse group of people
Yeah.
because I can't have, so I was part of the Black Student Union, but I was also part of a PIT, like sort of public interest group. So those were my people. And so after my first year of law school.
What do you mean public interest group?
So the people who go to law school who say they're going to go and work in like public defenders.
Oh, the idealists,
Yeah.
they call them.
Yes. So after my first year of law school, I was able to get a grant to go back to California to work for the San Francisco Human Rights Commission, which was an exciting time because at that point in time, there was AIDS happening in San Francisco, and there was
Oh, you finished after you finished law
no
school.
first year of law school.
After that was a summer job.
It was a summer internship.
Oh,
So I went there, and it was my opportunity to learn about discrimination. Which I didn't think that's where I was going to learn about discrimination was in San Francisco, but that's where I learned about discrimination was in San Francisco, where they were fighting against discrimination for people who had AIDS or who were HIV positive in housing and in employment. And one of the cases that I worked on was very cutting edge because this was somebody who was perceived as being HIV positive. He wasn't, but he was perceived as being HIV positive. So
how did people start perceiving that?
well, they started making judgments about like if somebody's sneezes or if they have sores. There were things that he had going on in his life that people could say, like if somebody coughs, oh my gosh, they have coronavirus. Everybody, they jumped to conclusions. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of people jumping to conclusions about his sexual orientation as well as his health status. So it was quite interesting work project. And then I went back to the University of Pittsburgh because I had found my people, and I started to take classes outside of the law school. I took a class or two in the I don't even know, the graduate school where they teach public policy. So then I got interested in public policy. So it was a great education and a good place to be in the end.
And there you met your husband.
Yes. So even better, I met my husband through a good friend that I met in law school. My friend Marquetta she is an immigration attorney, and she was having a fundraiser for Amnesty International because she was going to go to Haiti to help work on immigration cases. And so she had invited, of course, me and everybody else from law school, as well as my husband. My husband, she was living out in the suburbs in her parents' house. Her father was a professor, and he was on a sabbatical with his family in France. So she was watching the house. Bad idea to have Marquetta watch your house because she throws good parties. So Marquetta had a party, and my husband needed a ride out to Fox Chapel where the party was, and I had a car. So it was really one of those funny stories where I was at my parents' house planting flowers for my mom, and this is days where you didn't have cell phones. So I was really enjoying being with my mom and having fun with my family. But I was supposed to be back in Pittsburgh picking up people and taking them to the party. So my husband came to my house. He rang my bell and I wasn't there, and he rang the bell, I wasn't there. So he went back home and he called my friend Marquetta and said, I went to Toinette's house and she's not there, and basically complaining. He goes, well, here's her phone number, leave her a message. She'll call you when she gets home and she'll pick you up. So when I get home, I listen to this message. And my husband's Dutch, and he had been in the United States for about 2 years. And he spoke English with a very thick accent. He could barely understand. I could barely understand him. And he couldn't articulate the nuances of how do you ask somebody to come pick you up. So it became, you better come pick me up. So I said, I called my friend Marquetta. Marquetta, who am I picking up? He sounds like a nut job. And she says, oh, that's just Ernst, he's harmless. You know, she's like, oh, he's harmless. And you have to think about, this is a woman who's very brave, who's going to Haiti, and I'm thinking, and she's calling him harmless, and I don't believe that, So anyway, I call my friend Avery, it was Saturday night, and I say, Avery, what are you doing? Oh, I washed my hair, I got my rollers in, I'm under the dryer. I'm like, take those rollers out, we're going to a party. Because I didn't want to drive alone with this crazy guy. So she says, oh, okay, I'll go with you. So, of course, I pick her up first, and I say, we got to pick up this guy. I don't know him. He sounds a little scary, but I think, the two of us together will be fine. She goes, okay, all right. So he's standing on a corner in, a major corner, and he's got a paper bag, but he's got it twisted at the neck because he's holding a bottle of liquor. And I'm thinking, who does that? I'm going to law school, and I'm thinking, who does that? And I was like, oh, no, this is really not a good idea. I could just sense this is not a good idea. And so we pick him up. He gets in the car. We say nothing to each other, and I'm just driving. And my friend Avery's looking at me, and I'm driving. And I'm just saying, okay, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. We get to the party. We all just go our separate ways. We don't even say anything. So I get there and I say, Marquetta, who is that weirdo that I picked up? And again, she goes, oh, it's just her, and she's fine. And I'm like, nah, that doesn't sound right. So I started asking again, and she told me, some more about him. And I said, all right. So I let it go. But at the party, Marquetta, there's all these law school girls that show up at the party. And I start looking around. I said, there's no guys here. And I said, oh, except for that creepy guy that I brought, in my car. He's like the cutest, he's like one of the cutest guys here. There was other cute guys there, but they were spoken for. So I realized I got to find out more about this guy. So I asked him to dance, and we dance, and then we go our separate ways. And then I watch him. He's a little operator. He's got this shirt on that's got pockets, and he's got this bottle of tequila. And he's pouring tequila shots for my girlfriends in law school, saying, this is a shot for Amnesty International. And then he's asking for their phone number. So he's got a pocket full of phone numbers from my law school girlfriends. And he's like giving them shots of tequila. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. That's the only cute guy here. I got to get him. So we get back in the car and we talk, and I find out that he's pursuing his PhD. He's from Holland. That's why he has an accent. He goes to a party. He always brings something. That's why he bought the liquor. And I'm like, oh, we don't, I was thinking, oh my gosh, we rarely drink liquor because nobody wants a hangover. Yeah. And he goes, well, I bought a bottle, but I share it with 30 people. Nobody's going to have a hangover. So the next day, I said, oh, he's a cute guy, he's smart. I call him and I say, Marquetta. She goes, oh, maybe we can go out to brunch, on Sunday, so we could go out to brunch together. And I leave a message for him. I said, so he goes, oh, I had a conference, I wasn't around, so maybe we can go out during the week. And I say, well, how about Thursday? Because Thursday is a big party night for going out. And we go out on a date on Thursday night, and we have a good time. And we go to the Squirrel Hill Cage and dollar beers. That's, what we could afford. And then, we say, okay, he goes, I guess I'll see you tomorrow. We go out Friday night, and then he goes, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. And then Sunday he goes, are we going to have Sunday dinner together? Going out, and we haven't stopped since then.